As I said, this webinar series is hosted by the Coastal Ecosystem Learning Centers Network, or CELC Network, and we are a partnership of 25 aquariums across North America. And our office, NOAA's Office of Education, coordinates this network, and we work together to engage the public in protecting marine and coastal ecosystems. And we started an aquaculture initiative in 2017 as a way to better connect NOAA resources to the aquarium so that they could engage their visitors on the science of sustainable aquaculture. And it's evolved a lot, but we still, like I said, we still have this webinar series that's been going since then. And we're really excited that this is still ongoing, but we've expanded it kind of beyond this small group of aquarium educators as well to a broader aquaculture literacy community of practice that Brianna here on the call coordinates, she is now with NOAA's Office of NOAA Fisheries. And she coordinates aquaculture literacy across all of NOAA and to a bunch of informal learning institutions across the nation through various means, but especially there's a mini grant program that's wrapping up as well. So if you're interested in learning more about that, please contact Brianna. Her email's in the slide here, and she'd be happy to connect you with any of her work. If you'd like to learn more about CELC, or if you'd like to be on the listserv that will inform you of these webinars and you're not, you can email me. Or if you'd like to chat about anything aquaculture education, please feel free to reach out to us. All right, so with that, I'm gonna soon pass it over to Nadine and Kerry-Leigh, but I'm not gonna read through this entire description. Hopefully you did kind of read this when you signed up for this webinar, which is why you're here. But really quickly, this presentation is called New Interpretation Approaches for Diversity and Inclusion, and it will focus on Canada's Agriculture and Food Museum's new exhibit called Aquaculture Farming the Waters, and how it is inclusive, engaging, and relevant. And their presentation will explore how their exhibit commits to diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility, how they've adapted educational approaches for a broad audience, and how informal science learning approaches can resonate with visitors and spark dialogue about this evolving yet very old industry. All right, so Nadine Desine is the Manager of Education and Exhibition Interpretation at the Canada Agriculture and Food Museum. For over 20 years, she's combined her passion for education and agriculture and developed engaging educational products and museum experiences. She's also a dairy farmer and beekeeper and a board member of the Sarsfield Community Association. And then Kerry-Leigh Burchill is the Director General of the Canada Agriculture and Food Museum. And for the last 27 years, she's been devoted to the National Museums of Science and Innovation and is proud to serve as an executive with Ingenium Canada. She also serves on the board of directors for the Association of Living History, Farming, and as an advisor to the Inter-American Institute for Cooperation in Agriculture, and has been a Secretary General for the International Association of Agriculture Museums. And Ms. Burchill also has a degree in social science from the University of Ottawa, and is passionate about cultivating collaborative opportunities for cultural celebrations, heritage preservation, and partnerships about food security and sustainable development goals. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to our two presenters to talk about their exhibit, and I'm going to stop sharing this slide and open up their presentation. So thank you all.
All right. Thank you so much. And I wanted to thank NOAA and especially Maggie and Brianna for inviting us to wrap up a really exciting year. It's a real privilege for us to be the anchor in your 2022 series. My name is Kerry-Leigh Burchill. I am the director of the Canada Agriculture and Food Museum. I use the pronouns she, her, and in case anyone on the call does have any kind of visual acuity concerns, I am a middle-aged woman with dark hair who more frequently than not wears reading glasses now. I'll also take a moment just to do a quick acknowledgement that Nadine and I are joining you today from Ottawa, Canada. This is the traditional and unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people, and certainly Nadine and I both appreciate being able to work and live in such a beautiful place. Did you want to say hello?
Hi everyone, I'm Nadine. I go by the pronoun he, she, elle, and I'm very happy to be here and to share this tremendous experience that it was to create this exhibition. And I hope that anyone who works in exhibition and interpretation development can learn something today and also teach us something.
Yeah, I concur. We are hoping that this becomes a dialogue today as we get into the presentation. So if we can go to the next slide, please. So perhaps just as a very quick overview from quite a high level, you might be wondering, why is a farm on a National Historic Site in Canada presenting to CELC today? We are one of 3 National Museums of Science and Innovation in Canada. So our sister museums are the Canada Aviation and Space Museum and the Canada Science and Technology Museum. And we certainly, the thread that binds our 3 museums together is really looking at topics through the lens of STEAM. So science, technology, engineering, arts, and can be humanities and math. So if you can maybe just hit the next slide, I'll go through some of these very quickly, because I'm sure what you want to hear is Nadine's presentation. So Ingenium stewards the National Collection of Archives and Artifacts for Canada. And we are certainly working with partners from coast to coast to coast to encourage and empower science capital. And science capital really is that greater understanding of how science enriches and makes our quality of life really possible, not only in Canada, but around the world. And that we really do think that for a sustainable future, we need to have all kinds of people supporting us and bringing forward their voice in the STEAM horizon. So if we'll just go to the next slide. So in a nutshell, for those that perhaps didn't check us out online ahead of time, the Canada Agriculture and Food Museum is on one of the original research stations, the Central Experimental Farm. It's funny to know that we are about 8 minutes from the Parliament buildings. So this was originally one of the very first research stations. It's now in the heart of Canada's capital city. One of the only that we're aware of that would have a working farm and museum right in its downtown core. Prior to COVID, we had about 2,000 visitors to the site per year. There were about another 100,000 visitors to our community engagement programs, and then certainly hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of Canadians and international guests that were able to access our educational resources, our traveling exhibitions, and our digital programming. And if we go to the next slide. So perhaps you're wondering then, now that you know who we are and why we are here, perhaps your next question might be, how did aquaculture become a really important theme for us in 2022 and even before that? And so we, as Ingenium, as the National Museums of Science and Innovation, are trying to ensure that we are looking at topics, key issues of our time when it comes to any new exhibitions or programming. And when we think about a key issue of our time, certainly aquaculture we felt fit the bill. There's opportunities to have conversations about sustainable environment and climate action, certainly biosecurity, biodiversity, looking at everything from food security to nutrition and health. And it plays a huge role in our economy as well as from a heritage and cultural perspective. And so when we surveyed and tested both visitors on site and from a national survey, which Nadine will speak about in a moment, we certainly heard from all of the respondents that aquaculture was a topic that they'd be very interested in learning more about, but they were quick to say that they did not understand it very well. And certainly that there was a lot for them to learn and that they would appreciate having both an on-site exhibition and a traveling exhibition. So if we can hit the next slide. That would explain perhaps why this is what we called a layered learning approach. And so aquaculture is a 6-year commitment as far as the museum's concerned and with our partners. It took about, from the time we set this in motion, about 24 months to get the long-term exhibition open. We are about halfway through, 3/4, maybe halfway, 3/4 of the way through preparing a traveling exhibition. And we've been layering on programming that relates to aquaculture. And so for us, aquaculture really does include, as I said, all of those elements. So it could be that we're having a food for thought lecture series on environmental impacts. It could be that we're featuring recipes in our demonstration kitchen. It can be that we're talking to school groups that come through what aquaculture is and you know, as far as career or developing skill sets, what would be involved in aquaculture. And so we are really looking forward to the next 4 years layering on to what we've begun with the long-term exhibition that you're about to hear about. If we just go to the next slide. I would be remiss if I didn't say that, you know, timing is everything when it comes to the partners and the amount of support that we've received so far. Everyone on this call, I'm sure, is really already hyper aware that we are in the midst of the decade of ocean science and sustainability, and that 2022 was the International Year of Artisanal Fisheries and Aquaculture. And so we really felt that along with our 5-year commitment to food security, that this was just a perfect time to explore a topic that we really had not covered well enough. We were really remiss up until this point in really looking at aquaculture and its role in the overall agriculture sphere. So if we hit the next slide. We also, as I mentioned earlier, we really felt that this would be relevant and engaging for a really broad spectrum of audiences. I won't read through all of this, but I can say that when we did the testing, that we were asking those visitors on site and also the national respondents if and which of these topics was of importance to them, and they were telling us loud and clear that all of these topics were important to them. And so if you go to the next slide, we felt it was really important that we then made sure that we had a really balanced approach to this important topic. We made sure that we have an excellent partner, a prime partner that really helped us put this together. So we can't thank Fisheries and Oceans Canada enough for both their financial support, but also their willingness to really share with us the most recent research, really putting us into contact with different communities and scientists. We really benefited from having a national advisory council that covers, everything from academia, university professors, to provincial governments, to Indigenous communities, to industry experts. It was really important for us that we made sure that we had that. And so this, Brianna or Maggie, if it's all right, we'd like to do the poll here. If we can we pop into the poll? So if you're anything like me, growing up, perhaps you enjoyed create your own adventure stories. And so Nadine and I felt that it would be fun to turn over the reins to all of you to see how we end this presentation. And so we have 2 potential endings to this presentation. We're asking each of you if you can let us know which of these 2 you'd prefer to hear more about. So there are lessons learned. So it's really diving in a little deeper into some of the remedial work that's going on in the long-term exhibition now. Or if you're interested, we could have a sneak peek at the traveling exhibition. You'd be the first to see what's going to come up. And so once we have that poll wrapped up, we will decide. It looks like it's going to be the lessons learned, remedial actions.
That's me.
Yeah, it looks like we're about 75% in. So give everyone a few more seconds, but you're right. It looks like lessons learned is the winner. So. All right, I think we're almost everyone, so I'm going to broadcast the results, I think. And I think everyone can see that now.
All right.
So we're going to end the poll. And
Okay, well, whenever you're ready, we can move on to the next slide. So remedials it is. Aquaculture, farming the water. I'm super happy to share this experience with you. It's a tremendously beautiful exhibition. And I'm not just saying that because I worked on this exhibition, but because also I think it's a great exhibition. It opened this summer, end of summer in August. And we've been very curious to see how our visitors would react. And we'll talk about that a little further, but let's move on to the next slide. So the exhibition is hosted in our learning center. So the museum is made up of various buildings that are spread throughout the site. We have outdoor exhibitions, but also barns with farm animals, and our learning center, which is our our newer building that was renovated not too long ago. And there are some exhibition spaces also throughout the site. And one of the spaces where we are hosting the exhibition is in the Learning Center. It's not very large. It's 2,000 square feet. And it may look like a large space, but aquaculture, as you're probably aware, is a very broad topic. It has a lot of stories to tell. And so we had to make some tough choices because unfortunately, we could not tell the whole story. Next slide, please. In order to help us determine what story and how, or rather how we wanted to tell the story and which part of the story we wanted to focus on, we looked at our audience. And at the museum, our main target audience are families with young children, but also we have a lot of school groups. And we also have a growing number, or our audience has been shifting slightly, and this has been, I would say, it was accentuated with the pandemic. We are seeing more adults, groups of adults, seniors, young adults on a date at the farm. So we're seeing it all, and this is always, sorry, not this is always, but this has an impact on our end products as well, because we want to make sure that what we develop meets the needs of our different audiences. We also, being located in Ottawa, have a lot of tourists, especially over the warmer months. And we also have lots of new Canadians. So people for whom French and English is not their first language. We also have visitors with disabilities. We have a growing, an aging population. And we have a lot of multi-generational families who visit our sites. We're talking about more people in wheelchairs or using walkers who might be hearing or visually impaired. So we, again, want to make sure that they feel welcome and that our site is accessible to them. We also have a significant amount of visitors that are returning visitors that we also need to entertain each and every time they visit our museum. Next slide, please. So how do we make aquaculture relevant to all of this, like this very diverse audience? Well, we have something when we develop exhibitions called the big idea. It's one of the very, very first things we do, is we need to narrow down the topic. And we need also to work on our narrative approach. How are we going to tell the story of aquaculture? And in this case, we've decided to look at aquaculture through two different lenses. One of them is innovation, and it makes sense for us. We're, part of Canada's Museums of Science and Technology, but we also decided to use the lens of sustainability. And this brought us to our big idea, which is innovation will help secure a sustainable future for aquaculture in Canada. And the big idea is a bit like those sorting games where you can put some blocks that have certain shapes in, not other ones. It's really a tool to help us avoid, I would say, scope creeps, so we can really focus the topic throughout the exhibition. So everything that is included in the exhibition has to fit within the big idea. Next slide, please. Very early on, when visitors enter the exhibition, we talk about sustainability. And one thing we realized early on is that people have different definitions of sustainability. And for most individuals, sustainability is associated with taking care of the environment. But we wanted to reinforce that in order to be sustainable, aquaculture needs to be sustainable in different ways. And not just, though it's very important, yes, it has to take care of the environment, so that's the life below water, but it's more than that. And so we used some of the UN Sustainable Development Goals. We selected 4 that were very relevant to aquaculture, and we applied them throughout the exhibition, but we also defined them for visitors. We wanted our visitors to understand that aquaculture needs to be economically sustainable. People who live off aquaculture need to have, a decent income. It's also about partnerships, making sure we're not leaving anyone behind and working with local communities. It's also about the consumer's responsibilities to consume products that are produced in a responsible way as well. Next slide. So how do we do that? Well, it's by, how do we reach out to that audience and make sure that the topic is relevant? Well, we have to make sure that we're also creating a fun and engaging experience. So aquaculture, farming the water, is an immersive experience. People are using their senses to explore the exhibition, the displays. There are a lot of opportunities for active learning. Some people are happy reading texts, but for a lot of our visitors, especially the younger audience, they need to take part in activities. They need to take, they need to learn while doing. And we provided many of those opportunities in the exhibition. It's also a very highly accessible and inclusive content. We use humor where appropriate, and also use different voices when we're telling stories so that everyone feels presented in the space. Next slide, please. We're using different means of communication. Again, exhibition text for a museum. Of course, we have text on our walls, but we make sure that they're accessible. For example, we have maximum word counts for every level of text. Also, all of our texts are written to a grade 6 reading level, so we're avoiding jargon or industry words. And when we do use them, sometimes we make sure that they're defined for the visitors so they can understand what they mean. We know that visitors wanted specimens. They wanted to see live specimens in the exhibition, and for many different reasons, it was not possible on our side. So we did the next best thing is we had some tactile models, life-size reproductions produced for the different specimens that we're talking about in the exhibition. We're also using Braille, so a lot of tactile hands-on experiences so that all audiences can enjoy the content, but also especially for visually impaired visitors, so that they can have very, I would say, suitable learning tools for them. We're also using games, some, mechanical, very simple games like flip doors, but also some digital games, interactive videos. We wanted to connect the consumer with the producers and have them visit farms and have a conversation with the producers. So we created 3 interactive videos where visitors can interact with some producers. They can flip a notebook to select questions that they ask, and there's a video that plays that it's the producers addressing directly, answering the questions, and they can also see some footage of the farms. It was a way that we could connect them together, of course using artifacts and props. We also have the Fishing for Info website. We wanted we had to make some tough choices. We had to cut some content out, and we felt that we couldn't leave some of the content out entirely. So we created a web extension to the exhibition. So throughout the exhibition, we have QR codes, and if visitors want to learn more about the topic, they can scan it and access those white web pages. We also use infographic and illustrations because, an image is worth 1,000 words, and they're great communication tools. Next slide, please. One very important element of our exhibition development process is testing, and this applies to all of our products. So in this case, it's exhibition development, but if you're doing programming, you're developing school programs, interpretation tools, it doesn't matter what it is, testing is key to success. And in our case, we test throughout the development process. So even before we start fleshing out the content and assembling ideas, we test during the exhibition development process, but also after the exhibition opens. And we test with different audiences. Yes, of course, our main target audience, but also some special groups as well, to make sure that all visitors feel welcome in our space and that the interpretive approach meets different needs. Next slide, please. Even before we started working on the project, we did a front-end evaluation with 3 different audiences. One of them was Canadians across the country, because we knew we wanted to have a traveling version, and we were very aware that what people knew on the coast, for example, about aquaculture versus in central Canada would probably be very different. So we wanted to test that. We also proposed the evaluation to Canadians who live in the National Capital Region, but who might not necessarily visit the museum, and also our members, so people who come to the museum on a regular basis. And overall, even though there were some regional differences, we were surprised to learn that Canadians are familiar with aquaculture to a certain extent. And salmon and fish farms were the two, I would say, forms of aquaculture that they were most familiar with on average 70% of respondents making those connections. But we realized that when it came to oyster and mussel farming, but also the production of sea vegetables like kelp and other seaweed, that most Canadians were not aware at all that these products were part of, the aquaculture industry. We also asked them other questions, so not just what do you know about aquaculture, but if you were to visit an exhibition about aquaculture, what would you like to learn and what sort of experiences would you like to enjoy? How would you like to learn? Next slide, please. We also tested with other museum institutions and interpretation centers to see if they would be interested in hosting an exhibition on aquaculture. And the answer came back with a strong positive. Most of them answered yes or somewhat. And I must say that the few institutions who were not interested about an exhibition on aquaculture were usually aviation museums. So I can understand the disconnect and why they would not be interested in an exhibition on this topic. The other question we were wondering is how big are your exhibition space? Because if we're going to develop a 3,000 square feet exhibition and no one has rooms this big, then we're going to have a problem in the long run. And so it came back that most hosting institutions, the average was, anything between 750 and 1,000 square feet, with 950 being the average. There was more interest on the coast, and it didn't matter where the museum or institution were located in Canada. Most of them wanted to know about Indigenous content, if it would be included. Also, if we'd be talking about the environmental impact or the relationship between aquaculture and the environment, and if there was editorial independence for the museum. Next slide, please. I'm proud to say that in Genium we have very high accessibility standards. They were developed and put together in 2019, and they very much focus on the physical accessibility in the exhibition, in our exhibition space, but also there is some information and support and guidelines for intellectual accessibility. But there are some gaps. For example, the placement of Braille is not clearly stated in our standards. So we still have some work to do to flesh it out, and it's an evergreen document. So we're constantly improving it, but this is extremely helpful when it comes to designing exhibitions and also interpretation spaces, I would say, in the museum. We also have digital media standards, and this is also a work in progress. And that's really to make sure that, throughout our 3 sites, that all of our digital media there's some consistency between them, and also that visitors between museums can sort of find the same navigation formats. Next slide, please. Testing, that's as I said, it's woven throughout our exhibition development process. And one of the very first step is what we call the mock-up phase, or that's really like the arts and craft, cardboard and paper testing sessions. So we test everything from text to interactive elements, videos, we test navigations, we test our concepts or ideas. The whole idea of the mock-up testing is it's now or never if we need to make substantial changes. Sometimes ideas look great on paper, but when it's time to start, developing them, we encounter hurdles. Sometimes they just don't work with our visitors. So it's always better to realize that sooner rather than later, so that we can make substantial changes, find solution, and move on with a better product. We also have testing sessions with different groups. Next session, please. Next slide, sorry, please. For example, we realized in our past project that we were consulting with the visually impaired community too late in the process. And when we were doing testing sessions with them, often we were not able to incorporate the recommendations because we were too advanced in the process. And it required the changes were just too substantial and we couldn't apply them. And so we decided from now on, we're going to test when we're still developing storyboards, so that we develop the storyboard with their needs in head, and to develop products that are suitable for the way that they learn. And so we organized sessions. This was particularly difficult because it was during the pandemic and we were locked down. So the sessions were virtual sessions, and we had someone who facilitated the session, and we proceeded. It was somewhat challenging, but it went really well. But we proceeded by providing them with very clear descriptions of the different elements that they were encountering in the exhibition. And as we sort of walked them through with descriptions, they would voice their thoughts, describe us what they were experiencing, the difficulties they were encountering, what they found challenging. And so we were able to take the feedback that we got from those sessions and to finalize the storyboard and the terms of reference before we even started building the different exhibition elements. So that was very, very beneficial. Next slide, please. So once we were done with the mock-up and that we finalized the storyboards, we were able to move to the next step, which is prototyping. So we built one of our exhibition walls, and we pretty much just put everything on there, like the videos, the games, the text, the tactile models, the braille, everything. And we tested for many, many, many days, over many days with different audiences. And we brought back again our visually impaired consultants so that they can help us out. And this was tremendously beneficial because we realized during the process that there are no clear guidelines for the placement of braille. And the only guidelines we could find were in relations to signage in, for example, shopping malls or airports where you put, bathroom signs and things like that. And so they helped us really determine ranges of where we could put the braille when it was actually easy to read for people of different heights. Next slide, please. So once we're done with that, we moved on to an even more advanced prototype. Sometimes those are the elements that end up in the exhibition, but usually we still need to tweak a few things. Again, at this point, we're testing a lot for robustness and also safety. We know that our visitors, especially with a young audience, they love our exhibitions very, very much, and sometimes they interact in a very enthusiastic way with buttons and doors and games, and so they have to be like built to withstand lots of love. Let's just call it like this. And once we're done, well, we can move on to the next slide. Just a quick sidebar. This is a testimonial that I received in an email from one of our visually impaired participants. She was just very happy that we were consulting with them at the right time. So she just wanted to share that with us. Next slide, please. Okay. And then the next one is the remedial. We're going to skip over this slide actually because we'll talk about this a little more afterwards. And finally, just wanted to share you, when it comes to diversity and inclusivity, we wanted to tell different stories and give different voices, to be able to listen to different voices in this exhibition. And so at the very center of the exhibition, we have what we call the Agora. And there are 3 stations where visitors can actually take part in what I talked about earlier, the interactive videos. And so, for example, in this case, we have 3 different farmers, 2 women and a man. One of the women is Indigenous, and 3 different types of aquaculture farms as well. So some are very, lots of innovation, state-of-the-art technology, for example, on the salmon farm, which is a RAS system, versus we also have bottom more culture, more traditional ways of farming oysters. So yes, it's representing diversity in the people, but also in the industry. Next slide, please. This is just quickly to show you the Fishing for Info app with the tags in the exhibition that connect the topics with the web pages. We also have some Braille on those tags, and the QR code is also a raised square. One problem that we've encountered was where do you scan if you can't see the QR code? So all of the QR codes are tactile so that the visitors can know where to scan. And once they get onto the website, it's a fully accessible site with a screen reader. Next slide, please. And this is the final product, just some quick shots that we took on the night of the opening. As I said earlier, it's an immersive experience. So we have that water effect on the floor. So you really, it's almost like you're feeling like you're walking on the seabed. We also have a beautiful arts installation that reminds us of kelp, moving with the tides, the current, and some fish in there. It's absolutely beautiful. Next slide, please. This is just to show you some of the interactive elements and the displays. The specimens were very popular with kids. They're being pet a lot. Next slide, please. Here's also a host of different experiences for visitors. The interactive videos are extremely popular. If there's someone in the exhibition, they are by default sitting there and watching the displays, the videos, sorry. There's also in the top series of images in the middle, that's the other very, very popular interactive element. It's to talk about feed conversion. And so visitors need to match the amount of food that each farm animal has to eat in order to put on a kilo of weight, or to produce a kilo of meat. And if you have the right answer, the animal makes its animal sounds. So the cow moves, and while the fish makes bubble sounds. And if you have a wrong answer, that's just like a beep sound, and it's fully accessible with Braille. So it's very, very popular. Next slide, please. Okay, so I will pass you back to Kerry-Leigh.
Thanks, Nadine. I'm sure you can see why I love working with Nadine so much. She's very passionate about this topic and the others. Nadine mentioned already that we have really seen a changing demographic at the museum. So definitely still wanting to super serve those families and teachers that are visiting with young children. However, we have seen definitely visitors with different backgrounds, with different abilities, and we know that with that comes different learning styles. And so we've made a concerted effort at the museum to make sure that some of the topics and some of the tangential benefits of aquaculture are seen around the site. And so if we can just go to the next slide. So we, in addition to having, and you'll see in the next few slides that there are some examples, but in addition to having different outputs across the museum site, we also wanted to make sure that those that were really curious, I mean, you might have seen at the very beginning that our mission is to be a catalyst for curiosity, so that there are ways to extend your visit, and there are ways for us to continue our learning, and that's part of our desire in presenting to CELC today, is to create perhaps some new partnerships or opportunities to collaborate, to see some of the programs that you've done for your audiences, questions perhaps that you have from teachers or audiences that are where we could perhaps be sharing some of our information, but also to learn from all of you and how you're covering similar topics. So if you just hit the next slide. So good examples, we worked with a local artist to create a giant mural that's in the lunchroom. So perhaps not something that we would normally have thought of in the past, but it is a way to definitely engage some of those classes, perhaps students with that are visual learners, those that want to actually go up and be able to touch and play a game. Next slide. So we also, in another section of the museum, have a different display that's talking about the decade of ocean science, really focusing in on how science is going to help us with sustainability when it comes to research. And this is more on an international level. And then the next slide, we're almost getting there. So you did not in the poll choose the traveling exhibition, which is totally fine. You get to choose your own adventure, but I'll give you a very quick, Nadine already mentioned that it is a flexible design that will suit 750 to 1,000 square feet. It is intentionally being done up that it will be relevant to audiences throughout the country we now know as Canada, but it is also able to serve other countries as well. So, for example, the United States. And we definitely have created it in a way that it could go to an aquarium, it could go to a science center, it could go to a regional museum, but it could just as easily go to an airport or a shopping mall or a hospital lobby, anywhere that they want to have an opportunity for their audiences to engage with a really dynamic topic and to really hopefully learn a little bit more about the just how much aquaculture brings to our quality of life, not only in the foods we eat, but in a lot of the products also that we consume that have aquatic ingredients. So the next slide, I think Nadine was going to talk a little bit about lessons learned, and we'll probably be switching over to the other presentation that you've selected.
Lessons learned. I cannot reinforce enough the importance of creating and maintaining your relationship with different communities. I mean, they are your lifesavers when it's time to test. They're the best judges of how successful or unsuccessful certain elements are, and in helping us make recommendations so that we can produce products that meet their needs. Never assume it's good enough, because it's never good enough. It doesn't matter what it is. Test the elements before it's too late. Don't wait until you have advanced prototypes to reach out to different communities or even your own members and your own audience, because then it's too late to make significant changes and to implement the recommendation. Test with as many audiences as possible. Each audience has different needs, and you want to make sure that everyone feels welcome in your space and everyone has a valuable and I would say fun and engaging experience. And plan ahead. We'll talk about that a little more, but corrective measures and remedials take time and they're expensive. And often once an exhibition, a product opens, we tend to move on to the next one. But the remedial phase sometimes can take as much time as developing a different product. So it's very, very important to plan accordingly. That was it for this presentation. I don't know if you have questions before we move on to the next one.
Yeah, so if you have questions, feel free to put them in the chat. But yeah, we have one more PDF that I'm about to share, but I'll look in the chat and see if anyone asks anything while I load up the other presentation.
All right. So all of you, or the majority of you, selected the remedial actions, a little bit of a deeper dive into how we are right now, actually today, they are downstairs putting together some of the remedial fixes into the exhibition. And so Nadine has put together a little bit of a presentation just on, so what did we not get right? What are some of those lessons learned? What have our audiences told us and shared with us? And when we say audiences, that's everything from our National Advisory Council coming through, some of the members, to our partners and sponsors, to our members, and to the audiences where we've already had many tens of thousands of visitors come through since we opened. So it was the right time to make some of those changes.
So evaluation, it's ongoing. It never stops. And there are some formal evaluations where we follow visitors around and we have a little chart and we check where they stopped, we count how much time they spend at the different elements. We ask them questions, we interview them. To just informal, we spy on them. Or sometimes also it's just we ask our own guides on the floor, like if they start reporting, people are really confused about this, or they keep on asking me questions about this thing because they don't understand it. So again, formal, informal, and the purpose of this testing really is to identify which elements are successful, because we also want to know what works well, but also where are the problems? Are there any unsuccessful interactives or any texts that are confusing? And also, if they are, well, what corrective measures should we be applying? Next slide, please. So when we're testing, one of the things we want to test for are the learning messages, the learning outcomes and the key messages. People might have a lot of fun playing with an interactive game, but if we can't use that interactive to pass on the right messages or to reach the right learning outcomes, then to a certain extent it is a failure. So we want to test that. And if this element is not successful, we want to identify why is it unsuccessful? Is it because the instructions are unclear or incomplete? Sometimes we oversimplify things. We're so concerned about word count and making it simple that sometimes too simple is like too complicated. It's just not doing the job right. Is the information confusing? Sometimes it's just a question of the graphic layout. When we test element during our mock-ups and prototypes, we don't necessarily test together groupings or large groupings. And sometimes the way we test them on paper versus how they end up on the panel, there are discrepancies. And that can make the difference between an element sometimes testing well, but in the end not doing what it's supposed to do, or not conveying the message, or becoming confusing. Also, are the displays accessible? Is everything at the right height? The color contrasts? Is it well lit? And of course, the robustness. As I said, our visitors are very enthusiastic when they engage with our exhibition components. So can they withstand the love? And are they safe? Oh, sorry, I'm pressing on the arrows. Next slide. This is one very good example. This is what we call the NetPen Interactive. So we have a very large infographic where we explain how a NetPen works and what are the different challenges that are associated with NetPens. And on the reader rail in front, there are a series of doors with different innovations, like a photo of the different innovations on the door. And as visitors open the doors, there's a little description of what the innovation is. And then in the graphic, we have the challenges that these innovations seek to resolve, or how they're going to hopefully make aquaculture more sustainable and mitigate the challenges. It didn't work very well. People were confused. They didn't make the association between the elements on the reader rail and the graphic, but also in the infographic, the way that the information was presented, it was a little mixed up and confusing. And that really comes down to testing elements separately or differently than how they will eventually appear in real life. And there were some design constraints, and we've made choices, and we didn't test after the changes were made. And so we ended up with this problem on our hand. Next slide, please. So how did we solve the problem? Well, we tested to identify, of course, what's wrong with this, and clearly identify where the problems are. In this case, in the infographic, the fact that during the design, some elements were taken out of the graphic and others were melted together, we ended up with just like a series of numbers and information, but they were not visually separated. And that's what we did. So on one side of the graphic, we color-coded all of the elements that were associated with NetPens. How do they work? On the other side, we color-coded all of the elements that were associated with the challenges. We also had added, a description or a title to each of the column. And also one of the elements, they're all letters, and the other ones, they're all numbers. So we started by separating them. We also changed the instructions on the reader rail. And we had some problems with the flip doors. They ended up being just too heavy. We tried to make adaptations and changes. And in the end, we decided this is just not working. We've invested a lot, but we keep on investing because we invested a lot and it's just not working. So we changed our approach completely. We went from flip doors to a photo with a text and a button. And when visitors press on the button, then we have the risks or the challenges that are being mitigated by the solutions like that. So we tested our new version with the visitors, and it's actually being installed today. I was really hoping I'd be able to update the image with the end product, but unfortunately they're not done making those remedials, so it's still being changed. But during testing it worked well, but we're not done. Once it's on the floor, we're going to do other sessions to see have we solved all of the issues, and if not, well, we're going to proceed with other corrective measures. Next slide. So visual contrasts. I don't know if you can see it, but on the photo to the right, there are some chairs for people to sit down, and they are dark blue and they're very difficult to see. And so it was becoming like a tripping hazard. So we replaced the blue chairs with red chairs, some nicer color contrast. On the left, there's an interactive that people were missing. We changed the color of the frame from white, which is on the photo, to a very nice seaweed green. And now it's easy to see it, and people actually see the interactive and interact with it. So that's great. Next slide. And the last one is safety. We also had the same flip doors for another interactive where people had to identify if different sea animals were friends or foes of shellfish. And again, we decided to change the approach completely, and we moved from flip doors, real doors, to another type of door that you can simply just lift, that are much lighter and safer for fingers and overall. Next slide. And so the next step, we're still doing testing. We're still doing remedials as time moves, as we're seeing more visitors interact with the exhibition components. We're still making some significant changes as needed. We will also follow up with the corrective measures, making sure that they solve all of the problems that we have identified. There are little windows in the exhibition wall. We want to furnish them with some props, so that, because everyone looks inside, but there's nothing right now. So let's make it a little more engaging. And we also have a little section with the oyster growth that we want to add more interactives to make it a little more hands-on for visitors. And I think that's it. Yes. Any questions for us?
Any questions or anything that you'd like to share, perhaps that you're doing at your organization that's working really well on a similar topic that we could consider? We didn't talk about the discovery cart. So both for the long-term exhibition and the traveling exhibition, we will have a cart that will be filled with all kinds of activities, conversation starters, different examples of biodiversity when it comes to aquaculture. So we're always looking to learn from others that are doing a great job with education as well.
Yeah, please feel free to put your questions in the chat or raise your hand and I can unmute you since we have a small group. I know if Bree or I have a question too, and we'll give everyone a minute, but I don't know if Bree has a question, but I think I could always start us off. We have a couple minutes.
Go ahead, Maggie.
Okay, well, I was just wondering if there was any pushback from the visitors about it. I mean, in Canada, when I was in Canada, we learned how controversial salmon farming is and how you dealt with any potential controversy around the topic.
I really appreciate that question. It was certainly something that we went into this topic with eyes wide open, knowing that definitely from a genetic perspective, that there were some current concerns around farmed salmon, that net pens specifically for environmental reasons were quite often a hot button topic in the news. To date, we haven't had much. The only sort of trolling that was happening on social media happened well before the exhibition even opened, and it was someone assuming that we wouldn't actually talk about the benefits and the challenges. And I think that's really been where we've had success thus far with the exhibition, is that we really, with the work with the advisory council and with all of the testing, wanted to make sure that we were saying, look, this is an always evolving industry. And that as technologies advance, or as we look to perhaps even traditional knowledge from some communities, that we're always going to be able to update this. But by looking at it through that lens of innovation, that it's hard to, debate the fact that an innovation has occurred, and we're talking about, what are the positive consequences and what could be the challenging consequences. So to date, knock on wood, the conversations that we've had have been really respectful, and really they've helped us form some of the remedial changes that we've done.
Yeah, and I think we have one person typing a question, but Bree and I wanted to state too that, again, we are excited to share this recording with everyone, and we've had a lot of people asking about where they can start with this topic, so I think it'll be really useful for those folks who couldn't make it today. So we have a question about, was your relationship with the Canadian Council for the Blind established before this, or was this a new partnership? And in general, did you form new partnerships to get community feedback for this project?
It was an existing relationship that we built upon. So we did have some contacts, but it's a very large organization and they have a lot of members. And so we were extremely lucky because we had a substantial turnout, lots of people, many participants who wanted to help us develop this exhibition for them. And we actually were able to establish, I would say, personal working relationships. And now I have like my very own little group of people that I reach out, sometimes just little questions. Maybe we don't need an entire, testing session, but it might be just little questions like this that I feel comfortable reaching out to them and asking them if they can just give me your honest opinion. What do you think would work better? And then we will test eventually. But sometimes we're also developing other groups right now. We're working on a tractor simulator. And so we are also establishing different groups so we can have people with different types of disabilities to come in and test that interactive as well. And we also tested it with that same community also. It's an process, really.
Yeah, and I saw one other person typing in the chat, but they stopped. So I think, and I know I don't want to keep anyone too late. It is past 5 Eastern here, but if you did have any further questions, Kerry-Leigh and Nadine's emails are right here, and I think they're more than happy to talk, as they said, and really interested of hearing any work you all are doing with exhibits or education. So thank you so much. This was amazing. I hope I can visit you all in Ottawa someday. Those exhibits look really beautiful. And so I think we'll just close out for tonight and the year as well, and be in touch in the new year what's coming up. So yeah. Yes, Sarah said I want to visit too. So I think we should all organize a group travel to you all.
Open invitation. Yes.
Yeah. Really lovely. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. Happy holidays. Stay warm if you're in a cold environment. So, and we'll see you all soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
I'm not even sure how we leave.